Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to our fourth annual Catamount College Connection program. Our virtual session includes participants from 35 states across the US and 17 countries. This is a testament to the strength of our global campus community, and we are so glad to have you here with us today. My name is Philip Bruno, and I am the chair of the admissions committee for the UVM Alumni Association Board of Directors. On behalf of the Alumni Association and the Office of Admissions, I'm thrilled to welcome each of you. Our mission today is to offer you a behind-the-scenes look at the college search and application process from some of the best in the business, including our very own UVM Director of Admissions, Moses Murphy. We aim to provide information, tools, and resources to guide you as you consider your college options and prepare your application materials. We hope that you leave this session today feeling empowered, excited, and more confident as you take this next step in your life. It's a really exciting time. The college search and application process can feel a bit overwhelming. I vividly remember some of the anxiety that comes with applying to college, but also remember the thrill of an acceptance letter. A long application process can end in excitement and pride when a college or university selects you. We hope to make that process feel a little smoother for you today. I'm a proud UVM alum from the class of 2012. I know many of you here today have parents, grandparents, or other relatives in your family who went to UVM and are a part of our community of 124,000 Catamounts living all around the world. Congratulations, this is a very special connection with UVM. The focus of our work at the UVM Alumni Association is to continue building and growing the vibrant global community that makes up our UVM family. I share this with you because whether you have a connection to UVM or another institution, I encourage you to consider the value of your community, your network, in supporting you in this next chapter of your life. In as little as 1 year from today, some of you students may be preparing to start your first semester of college in the fall. As you consider where you want to go, where you want to study, who you want to be, and where you want your education to take you, I encourage you to lean into the communities and networks that you are a part of. But most importantly, chart your course, make your own story, create your experience, and be active and engaged learners. To our students in the audience, I know I speak for your parents and families when I say that we're really proud of all you've accomplished, and I hope you find these sessions valuable as you prepare for this new chapter. To all of our guests, thank you for being here with us today and making this Catamount College connection a vibrant and interactive experience. With that, I will turn the program over to UVM's Director of Admissions, Moses Murphy.
Phil, thank you for all you do on behalf of the University of Vermont with your work at the UVM Alumni Association. As Phil mentioned, my name is Moses Murphy, and I'm the Director of Admissions here at the University of Vermont, and I'll be serving as your host for today's program. Now, we have a full schedule today with lots of expertise packed into a short 75-minute window, so I want to be sure that we stay on track. However, before we get to the meat of the program, if you will, let me share with you the outline for today's program and a few housekeeping items. The first portion of the program will feature our Pro Tips workshop for understanding the admissions process timeline and basics about financial aid, led out by members of our admissions staff here at the University of Vermont. The second portion of the program will be our panel of admissions experts who will answer a series of often asked admissions questions from a variety of different vantage points. Collectively, our esteemed panelists have worked at 10 different colleges and universities, but fun fact, all of them at some point in their careers have worked right here at the University of Vermont. Finally, To end our program, Dr. Andy Rosenfeld from the Vermont Center for Children, Youth, and Families will share some thoughts on the brain science of happiness as it relates to this specific time in your lives as you navigate the admissions process. I do want to bring your attention to the event Q&A feature. If you hover your mouse over the center of the screen, you see an icon. For some of you, depending on your browser, it might be in the upper right-hand corner. Please use this to submit your questions that members of our admission staff will be monitoring throughout the program. We strongly encourage you to use this resource. If you have a question, chances are someone else in the audience has that exact same question. Now, our admissions staff, will be answering these questions, some of which they will answer privately and directly to you through the chat. But some of them will be published so that the answer can be heard by all in the audience. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Abby Stevens, who is our transfer coordinator and one of our assistant directors, who will lead out the pro tips for admissions and financial aid workshop. Take it away, Abby.
Great, thank you, Moses. And hi, everyone. My name is Abby Stevens. And as Moses stated, I'm one of our admissions counselors here at UVM. And I'll be joined by two of my colleagues throughout this presentation. And what we'd like to do is just give you some of what we think to be the pro tips as it relates to the admissions process. So we'll be going through how do you find that kind of right fit college, because there's a lot out there, a lot of good ones, the admissions timeline and what you should start thinking about as you get to different stages throughout, and what does holistic review mean in terms of the application process, as well as my colleague Jesse will be covering some pro tips as it relates to financial aid. When thinking about what characteristics are important to you, you're going to need to consider a fair amount of them. First being academic. So what academic offerings are you looking for at an institution? And that can be what majors and minor programs they have, but also if they have research opportunities and that sort of thing. Then it's important to think of other community aspects that are important to you. Where is the location? What's the size? What's the demographic feel of the student body? And then if specific learning opportunities are important, so we mentioned research previously, but study abroad, internship offerings, all can be really helpful to put on this list of yours and then start asking these questions early on. You also may want to consider, a big part of college life is what you're doing outside of the classroom, those extracurriculars. So how are you going to get involved in your college community, and what kind of clubs and organizations do you have on your list to pursue? All of these pieces come together, as this nice little graphic shows us on the slide, to have that right fit. And that might differ from a good friend of yours. So it's important to go through this exercise with yourself. So now we're going to get into the timeline a little bit. The college process comes into full swing that final bit of your junior year of high school and that summer before your senior year. And this is when you can start attending college fairs in person again, or virtually. Now all colleges have great virtual options that you can continue to utilize. And you can start hearing from people like me, admissions representatives, about the schools they represent. And so you continue to kind of fine tune that list of yours, as well as plan some visits. It's important also during this time, you can begin to draft your college essay. I know that those words strike fear in the hearts of many, but start working on your draft, and then you can get feedback from advisors and teachers during that time if you have a good draft started. You can also start creating your own list of how you're involved in your school community or local community and anything you're involved in. So when it comes time to applying, you have that list ready to go. And lastly, you'll want to think about during this time if you're registering for the SAT or ACT. I know for UVM, we've moved to test optional like many schools during the pandemic, but it'll be important for you to see if you'd like to register for those tests, especially considering which programs or schools you're applying to. So moving through the timeline here, we got to senior fall, and this is when things begin to ramp up. and you start to fill out and submit your applications, a really important step. You'll write supplemental essays. I know for UVM, we have some great supplemental essays we highly encourage. You'll also want to reach out to your teachers and advisors to confirm that they're able to write a letter of recommendation. Usually we recommend about 3 letters of recommendation. And then the fall is also when the FAFSA, the Federal Student Aid Form, opens. This is an application you'll want to work on with your family. And Jessie, my colleague, will be doing a deep dive into that later. But just know in your senior fall, you want to have this on your timeline. And lastly, during this senior fall, you can continue those college visits and continue connecting with admissions representatives. We love that. And maybe your questions from the summertime have changed as you've heard from more and more schools. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ashley, to talk a little bit about applications.
Thank you so much, Abby. Hello, everyone. And as Abby mentioned, my name is Ashley, and I serve as one of our regional admission representatives in the Office of Admission. And I'm so excited that you all are here today. So I'm going to get started by talking a little bit about some of our application platforms and admission types. So there are 2 widely used application platforms that many institutions across the country use. The first is the Common Application, which has around 900 partner institutions, and the second is the Coalition Application with around 135 partner institutions. So students can create accounts within these platforms and then complete a college admissions application within the platform that can be sent to multiple member institutions at once. Some schools do offer their own institutional applications as an alternative to the Coalition and the Common Application as well. In terms of admission types, there are 4 major categories of admission types. The first is early decision, which is a binding contract. So students are only permitted to apply to one institution early decision, and if students are admitted to that institution, they are required to attend. The deadline for early decision 1 is often in November. Some institutions also offer a binding option in January known as early decision 2, or sometimes it's also referred to as just ED2. Early action, on the other hand, has a fall deadline as well, which is often around November 1st, but there are no requirements that a student has to attend that institution if they are admitted. They simply hear a decision earlier and have more time to weigh out their college options. For early decision and early action applicants, decisions are often released before the new year. Regular decision is the next option, and this option often has an application deadline in January, and students typically hear their decision sometime between February through early April, depending upon the school. Some institutions use a rolling admission process, which means that students can apply throughout the year, and they will hear an admission decisions within a few weeks after their application becomes complete, rather than waiting for one specific decision release date. So what is holistic review? So some schools have specific requirements for admission, such as a GPA minimum and a testing minimum. However, it's very common for schools to utilize a holistic approach to reviewing applications. So this means that we look at more than just your GPA or any academic markers to make an admission decision, but we look at all of the components of your application to determine if you would be a strong fit for our institutions. So components used in the holistic review process are listed on the left-hand side of the screen. And all of these pieces are used to get a more comprehensive understanding of who you are beyond just your academic qualifications. So to continue with our admissions timeline, the winter is when students can expect to receive an admission decision depending on the type of admission you applied under. So either early action or regular decision. You'll also want to be in touch with the financial aid office to ensure that all of your required documentation is on file and that there are no missing supplementary documents. Now is also a good time to look for additional sources of scholarships, grants, and loan funding, which you'll hear about a little bit more in the presentation from my colleague, Jessie Murray. So as your senior year ends in the spring, you will have heard from all of the schools that you've applied to, and you should know your admission decisions by that time. So this is a good time to revisit and connect with admission representatives and even current students to ask any remaining questions that you may have. We also suggest making a list of pros and cons or a chart to keep all of the details organized for your college choices. Also, you'll want to look closely at any additional costs in addition to your tuition costs, so costs such as like traveling to campus or books or various fees like that. May 1st is the National Day of Decision for all students, and that is the date when you will choose the institution that you will attend. So after that decision is made, you'll have time to celebrate with your loved ones to recognize all of your accomplishments, achievements, and hard work that you have put in throughout your high school career. So before I wrap up my portion of the presentation, I'd like to leave you with a few helpful tips to stay organized throughout this college application process. So schools will be communicating with you a lot. So we suggest first making a professional email account that can be used specifically for all college communications. You'll also want to keep yourself organized by making folders as well. So we suggest maybe an email folder or physical folders at home for each college that you're considering. Making a college calendar to track all important dates, such as application deadlines, decision release dates, special events, financial aid deadlines will also be helpful as well. You'll also want to plan your college visits, register for any supplemental virtual programming, keep a list of questions that you have for any specific people or academic departments that you'd like to meet with either virtually or on campus. And lastly, you'll also want to be sure to keep official hard copies of important documents on hand, such as transcripts and things of that sort, in case they need to be resubmitted. So with that, we will go ahead and switch gears to Jessie Murray to talk a little bit about financial aid.
Thanks so much, Ashley, and hello, everyone. My name is Jessie Murray, and I work in the admissions office, but today I'm going to be sharing with you some information about the very important topic of financing a college education. I'll be discussing many different aspects of the financial aid, including scholarships, loans, timelines, and other resources. After the program, I hope you leave with a foundational understanding of best practices in building your college financial package. In higher education, we use a lot of acronyms, which can definitely be maybe a little bit overwhelming or confusing. Here are some that we think it's really important for you to be familiar with when discussing financial aid, but don't be afraid to ask when you hear something new or that you're not familiar with. The first term that you should know is the FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is the federal form used by domestic U.S. students to apply for need-based financial aid. This is used by nearly all colleges and universities. You may hear these terms while completing the FAFSA. The next one is the DRT, or also known as the Data Retrieval Tool. This is the online tool that's used to pull your family's financial tax information from the IRS directly into the FAFSA application instead of having to enter it all manually. This can definitely save a little bit of time and headache, so we definitely recommend using that. The school code is a unique code used to indicate which schools you would like your FAFSA information sent to. So if you are applying to a few different schools, you will include each of those schools' codes on your FAFSA. The CSS profile is another financial aid form that requires additional family financial information to package your aid. This form is not required by all institutions. For example, UVM does not use the CSS profile, but it is helpful to know about just in case you do have a few schools that are of interest to you that do use it. Another important term is called the, or I guess acronym is the EFC, and this term represents the outcome of the FAFSA calculation called the expected family contribution. A quick note is that in 2023, this term will actually be called the Student Aid Index, but for now it is known as the EFC, and this is a measure used to determine eligibility for need-based financial aid. It does not always necessarily indicate what you'll pay for your university education, so that's just something to be take note of. When you think of your financial aid package, think of it as two buckets of kinds of funding. So merit-based aid and need-based aid. These are two different buckets of money. Merit-based aid is determined by your academic merit at the time of application. Need-based aid, on the other hand, is aid that's based off of the information you'll provide on your FAFSA or CSS profile information. So this bucket can consist of things like loans, grants, or work study, but we'll break it all down in the next few slides. We'd like to start off, of course, by talking about the free money, which I know you're all excited about. Everyone likes free money. So this means these funds are gifted to you and you will not need to pay them back to the funding source. So scholarships are one type of free money, and scholarships can be either internal, meaning that they were awarded by the institutions you're applying to, or they can be external, which are scholarships may be given by private companies, nonprofit organizations, or state and local governments. External scholarships could be awarded for things maybe like extracurricular involvement or community service or academics, whereas internal merit scholarships are mostly based off of academics as seen in your application. Next, we'll talk a little bit about grants. Grants are also a form of free money that you're gifted and does not need to be repaid. Grants are typically awarded with need in mind, meaning that the student's and family income is considered for eligibility. Some types of grants are federal and some are provided at the state or institutional level, but understand that it does take a little work to mine this kind of free money, but it can definitely be worth your time to close the gap in your tuition bill. Next, we'll talk a little bit about loans, and I know loans can be a little bit more of an intimidating part of the financial aid process. You've probably heard in the news about borrowing student loans and having debt after graduation, which can definitely seem scary. Loans can help make college affordable as it really is an investment in your future. However, it's important to be realistic with the amount of loans needed and whether that school really is financially feasible for you and your family. So definitely keep that in consideration when you're going through your financial aid packages. There are federal loans such as direct subsidized or unsubsidized loans, as well as Parent Plus loans. And there are also options to borrow private loans and institutional loans. It's important to understand the difference between any loans you're offered and what level of loans you personally are comfortable borrowing. You may have questions about loans, and consulting with financial aid offices at different colleges you're interested in is definitely a good place to start for information. So in regards to the timeline for the financial aid process, research really is key, and starting early can definitely lessen the stress of the process. So we recommend starting early. 1 year before you plan to enroll is a good time to begin to research scholarships and the process of familiarizing yourself with deadlines, as well as using the net price calculator tools for any of the institutions you may be considering. 6 months before enrollment, U.S. students, I should say, can submit the FAFSA, which opens in October 1st every year. And that's important really to make sure that all financial aid paperwork and any additional materials that were requested have been submitted. Then you can start reviewing and comparing financial aid awards and asking questions of financial aid offices. While this process can seem a little bit overwhelming, we know it is definitely a big part of the process and sometimes stressful. So there are always resources available to assist in navigating this process. I want to encourage you to reach out to the experts whenever you have questions, as they are available to help. We've only just touched the tip of the iceberg here, but you can continue familiarizing yourself with the financial aid process by attending local financial aid nights, speaking with your school counseling offices, or connecting with college financial aid offices for guidance. Now, I know Abby, Ashley, and I have just shared a lot of information with you all, but hopefully it helps to start thinking about the details of admissions and financial aid processes. And with that, I will pass it on to Moses to continue on with the program.
Abby, Ashley, Jesse, thank you so much. So now it's time for our panel. Our experts have a lot of insight for you, and they're ready to share. We'll have our panelists start by just giving a short introduction, and then we're going to dive right into some questions that we've prepared for each of them. We do this to provide you all time to ask your questions in the event Q&A. As I mentioned, we've compiled some of just frankly the most frequently asked questions that we get at this time of year. But again, we'll be getting to some of the questions that you put into the Q&A. As a reminder, our admissions staff is also answering some of these questions privately and directly with you through the chat. But again, we'll be sure to get some of those published live so our panelists can answer the questions for you, and the audience can hear the response to those frequently asked questions coming out of the event Q&A. So Nicole, if you don't mind, why don't you start us off with introductions?
Great. So happy to be with all of you today. And I'm Nicole Curvin. I'm the Dean of Admissions at Middlebury College. And for 26 years, I've had the pleasure of working in higher education with students heading off to college. Fun fact, I started at the UVM admissions office at the beginning of my career, and happy to be with all of you to share information and hopefully answer some of those burning questions that you have. I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Chris Perlongo, Associate Director of Admissions at UVM. Use he, him pronouns. I'm a first-generation student from New York City. I've been in a variety of different institutions over my 20-year career, and I'm excited to be here today. So looking forward to answering your questions and interacting. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague from Boston University, Duffy Moran.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Duffy Moran. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Admissions at Boston University. I've been on the Board of Admission at BU for 16 years, and prior to that, I am a UVM alum. I graduated in 2003. More importantly, I still cheer for UVM hockey when playing BU. I just do it quietly at games. And I'm turning things over to Sarah, who is our final panelist. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Godwin, and I am a UVM alum from the class of 2000. And like many on this panel, my first admissions position was at the University of Vermont almost 20 years ago, and I loved it so much that I went on to get my degree in higher education and student affairs at GW, and for the past about 20 years have been working in highly selective admissions, both at Johns Hopkins and MIT, currently I work one-on-one with families as an admissions consultant to help them throughout the process. And now I will turn it back over to Moses for our panel.
Well, thank you all. And Nicole, if you don't mind, I think we'll kick it off with a question for you. And I wonder, as a highly selective institution, if you could talk a little bit about, what is the most important criteria, or what is the thing that you look at most closely as you evaluate a student's candidacy?
Yeah, thanks for that question. First and foremost, I think the colleges are looking for the academic potential. So looking at a transcript, looking at what types of courses students have taken, and really thinking about who the student has been as a scholar, what have been their interests, and how they've performed in those areas. But I also think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that we are also looking for community members. And so other aspects of the application that we think are important are taking a look at the essay, listening to a student's voice, understanding what activities have been important to a student, and hearing from other folks who know the student, thinking about the ways in which the letters of support really illustrate who the student is and how they would connect with community at a small place. So I'll cue it up for Chris next.
Yes, and Chris, I wonder, as you know, for the past year and a half almost, students haven't had the same level of access that they might have otherwise to extracurricular opportunities, campus tours, college fairs, high school visits, things of that nature. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how an applicant might demonstrate interest in a particular institution in lieu of being able to do those things.
Yeah, sure thing. And thank you, Moses. And remember, admissions counselors were in the same position. We couldn't access you folks either. So we're excited to get back engaging with people on campus virtually, and we'll unpack what that means. So again, it's important to remember that we were all in the same situation last year. So your ability or lack thereof to demonstrate your interest was the same as just about every other applicant. So don't feel like you're behind. Now that schools are opening up and visit restrictions have been lifted, however, there are ways to visit both virtually and in person. So first, let's talk about what each school is going to be different. Some schools are not going to factor demonstrated interest. Some will, and some will do so to varying degrees. So keep in mind that it's potentially only one part of a comprehensive holistic review process that we will consider your application under, basically accounting for all parts. So if so, how to demonstrate your interest? The traditional routes include a campus visit, and make sure you register for one when you do, connecting with the college as they visit your high school or at a college fair, or scheduling an interview, again, if the college offers it. Each institution is going to be a little bit different. And while those avenues are mostly back this year, the virtual space has taught us there are many other ways. Registering for an online event, or attending an online information session, contacting your admissions counselor, or even engaging with our emails and virtual outreach that comes into you. And trust me, you're going to get a lot of emails and virtual outreach from just about every college you engage during the course of this process. So ultimately, whether or not the school does or does not consider interest, it can't hurt, as long as you don't overdo it. We love to hear from you, just not every day. And unfortunately, in my 20 years, that is not a made-up example. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Moses and look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks so much, Chris. Duffy, I wonder if you could chime in next. Again, due to the pandemic, so many things that students would have done to try to supplement their application. So, jobs that they might have done, extracurricular activities, experiential learning opportunities, all of those things were unavailable to them for the most part throughout the pandemic. And Duffy, I just wonder if you could talk to how this might impact or change their candidacy in the admissions process.
Great, thank you, Moses. That's a great question and something that we've certainly heard a lot of over the last year and a half or so. Our students really concerned about this, and that makes sense. So much of who you are as a high school student, as an applicant to college, is exhibited through those extracurricular activities, to those activities that you're doing outside of school, and many of those have been dramatically affected by COVID. I'd say the most important part in terms of advice around this, though, is to remember, think about what you did do during that time. Think about what it was that time consisted of for you. What we as admissions officers are trying to understand as we review your application is who you are outside the classroom. And that's very different than just the sum of activities participated in. So we want to know what you were up to and what that time consisted of. We understand completely that many of your activities may have been canceled, and sports seasons and all those really important things. But what did that time look like? Were you reading? Were you baking? As someone who now orders flour in 50-pound bags, I get that. Were you having game nights and spending time with your family? Were you helping your family? Were you helping folks in your community? What were you up to outside of your school life at that time? And what did that time look like for you? Really focus on thinking beyond just kind of those traditional extracurricular activities, athletics and music, the arts, and all those things that folks might do, and try to think of what that time meant to you, what you were doing, how you were engaging, and how you were staying engaged in your community. I think that's really important, and it's really important to also understand that schools who are reviewing your application will understand that it was a massive shift, a massive change. We all are people too who are reviewing your application. As Ashley mentioned in the holistic review slide, we're trying to really understand deeper into the process of what excites you, what interests you, and how do you spend your time when you're not in a classroom. And that can come in a lot of different ways. And we understand also the disruption that's been caused as folks who have been going through it too. So know that there are people on the other side. Make sure that you're explaining as well as you can what that time looked like, what you were able to do, and what was happening in your life. And know that the people reviewing your applications are going to understand that, of course, things were canceled and things shifted. We're going to not have the same expectation that we might have in a normal universe where this didn't happen. We're going to expect that things changed, that things pivoted, and that maybe you were limited and had to look at different activities, but don't sell the things you were doing short. I think that's the really important piece. Be thoughtful about what it is that you used your time for, what it is that you were doing, and understand that it probably is going to fall outside those traditional activities, athletics and things like that. But what did that really consist of for you, and how did you use that time personally, and how did you grow? What excited you and what interested you during that time?
Great, thank you, Duffy. And Sarah, for you, a question about staying organized. As students start this process, they're going to get a bunch of information thrown at them, particularly as they whittle down their list of schools and they start sort of broadly. What advice would you have for students as to how they can stay organized throughout this process?
One of them throughout this process is for students and families, when you're going on college campus tours, take pictures and make a folder on your phone for that particular institution. So UVM's campus tour should have a folder, just a few snapshots of maybe some of the materials you got in the office, what some of the buildings look like, you'll start to see and feel that a lot of these schools blend together in your mind. I can't remember, did we hear this at this school? Oh yeah, we were walking by that building, remember? So that will help you to, and your family, to remember what you heard and what you saw, when and where. And my second tip is I always like a folder. We also heard earlier about some electronic tips, but to keep maps and your favorite mailings that you get, it does help to have, you know, an old-fashioned folder and a central place to keep everything organized.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So Nicole, back to you. As you know, many schools during the pandemic either transitioned to a pass-fail grading system, or they gave students the option to be graded in a pass-fail format. And so I just would like to hear you talk a little bit about how that's viewed by a college. How does that change your process? And in what ways does that impact your evaluation?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Moses. First and foremost, a shout out to high schools everywhere for doing the full pivot during the pandemic. I think it's really important for families to understand that colleges look to the high schools about what was best for their community. So whether a school chose to be pass fail, whether they chose to change up their course options for some reason to manage during the pandemic, we're in full support of their efforts to do that. And as we evaluate applications now, we're taking that into consideration. We're looking to the school to tell us how they made those changes and what might look different in their school community than it has done previously. So I want to reassure families and students out there that we are taking that into consideration and we're not passing judgment on the choices that high schools have made. Middlebury and other college admissions people all over read lots of different types of transcripts in all shapes and sizes. Some schools have no grades, some schools have written evaluations. And so we've always been really adept at looking at the context of the individual and not taking a broad brush approach to reviewing applications. Certainly the pandemic has impacted everything that's been happening in the classroom and in remote learning, and we'll get information from high schools. We've already started to see information in applications that provided us an overview of how a school community really adapted during the pandemic. So as they were changing course offerings or moving to a pass-fail grading scale for a particular period of time, that's information that we're looking out for, and that's information that your schools will typically share with us. So I just want to reassure you that yes, it is a bit different than it has been in the past, but that doesn't mean that colleges really are discounting that piece. We're really looking at what information is coming to us and reviewing it in the context of where we've been. We understand that things have changed, and I just want to reassure families that as we're looking at pass-fail grading, you won't be disadvantaged in the process because your school system or your school community opted into that choice.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So Chris, I wonder if you could give a little insight into either websites or social media sites that are good for students or families to gain a little insight into different institutions. How do they get sort of the inside scoop, if you will?
Yeah, sure thing. And thanks again, Moses. As we mentioned before, look, there's a lot of information out there, and some of it good and some of it not so much. So I always advise students to be sure that you're searching with this mindset. Just because you read it on the internet doesn't make it true. Okay, so know the content of what you're searching under. For general research and just starting out your college search, there are some great third-party sites out there. College Board, Big Future, CapX, College Insight, College Navigator, Chegg, Niche, and Unigo, among others. Of course, there's also social media, and leave it to the 42-year-old guy to talk to high school students about social media such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and yes, TikTok, among many others that are out there, and probably ones I don't know about yet. So all that said, however, the absolute best place to learn about your schools is that school's website. The main reason being is that all the information is current. It's directly from that institution and it's without fault. So when it comes to deadlines, materials that are required as part of an application, and straight facts about that institution, it's always better to go straight to the source. And when you go to that source, you can also find the information for your admissions counselor, who you can contact, again, with any questions you may have along the way. And lastly, I'd say be sure to keep an eye on that email inbox, as again, a lot of these communications will be coming straight from that institution. So you can be sure that the information there is good, current, and correct. I will say there will be a lot. So maybe think about setting up a college-specific email address. But again, it's information that you can rely on. And often the primary way you communicate during the application process is via email, among others. But email will be key when it comes to establishing your portal and getting most likely your decision. So be sure to keep an eye on that email throughout the process. Moses, back to you.
That's great advice, Chris. So Duffy, let's turn to you and let's talk gap years. So how do you at BU view students who have taken a gap year? And is it your advice that a student apply while they're in high school prior to taking a gap year? Or is it best that they wait until after they've had the experience and then apply for admission?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Moses. So we do see a lot of students who will take gap years coming in, and gap years, whether they're applying from the gap year or whether they're applying prior. More often than not, we tend to see students, and our experience is that it's good for students to apply into the gap year prior to actually embarking on it, so applying during their senior year in high school, but it really does come down to a personal decision for the student. Many students, I think, really like that security of having their spot in a class secured at the institution where they plan to attend before going off to pursue a gap year. And it can be a really fulfilling experience, whether it's volunteer work or travel or pursuing faith or religious-based programming. Students often do find that they get a lot from that experience and can bring a lot from that experience to their first year. BU in particular, and many schools like BU will even have programs that start in second semester of your first year, whether that's January or February. We actually have one of our largest programs where 600 students start at BU each January in traditionally what would be second semester with a gap semester built right in. So it's something that we really encourage and appreciate students doing. And I would just say it's something where it's a decision around what makes the most sense for you, for your family, as to whether or not to apply in prior and start up and basically be admitted to a school and end up paying the enrollment deposit. And that's another piece, is that you are required to pay the enrollment deposit at the institution, and then basically submit a request for a gap year. It's good to check in with different institutions. Each place may be a little bit different as to how they review that process. Our institution tends to be really loose with that. If a student has a plan, has an interest in taking that gap year, we'll sign off on it, and they will have a spot in the class guaranteed for either the full semester or the full year after. But check in with each school, talk to different schools if that's something you're planning to do. I'd strongly encourage it. It's a great experience. It's a great opportunity, but you just want to make sure you're doing your research beforehand. I think most schools will be pretty open to it, but it's a good discussion to have as you're going through the search process. Moses, I'll send it back to you.
That's good stuff, Duffy. Thank you. So Sarah, you've worked with many students, and no doubt some of those students go off to college, and then you hear from them, and they come to you with the benefit of hindsight, something that I know we all wish we had when we made important decisions. And I just wonder if you've picked up on any advice that these students would give, knowing what they know, having already gone through the process.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually picked up a lot of advice, and one of the things is to really focus on what matters to you. And we had heard that a little bit previously. I believe it was in Abby's overview about focusing on the things that are important to you. So for example, don't just listen or look at the admissions office's website in your research of a college. Be sure to go on to the Career Services Office website. I actually spoke with a student last year and said, I really, I had really wanted to study abroad during the summer. I wish I had looked into that more. And so look at every academic department website that you might be interested in and sort of try to peel back the layers on a particular college or university that you're researching, to go to all the other offices like career services, like athletics, like study abroad, so that you see all the opportunities. So that's one of my tips and things that I've heard from students in hindsight. I wish I had considered X, Y, or Z. So thank you, Moses. Back to you.
That's great, Sarah. Now we are getting lots of activity in the event Q&A. I love it. And Nicole, one of the questions we received was around supplemental essays, or some schools optional essays, or what have you, and an additional essay perhaps to what is asked in the Common Application or the Coalition. Can you talk a little bit about how supplemental essays are used in the process? Maybe some advice that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to first and foremost think about the opportunities of everything that you put in your application. So a supplemental essay is an opportunity to use your voice to answer a question, but to get creative as well. And so you want to leave yourself plenty of time to think about how you'll answer the question, think about the institution that you're applying to. It's not just about answering supplemental questions in general, it's also about who's going to read this and what institution are you thinking about or have in mind. So as you use that opportunity, I think it's really important to give yourself time and space to have someone take another look at what you're doing and see if it sounds like you. The essay, and whether it's the Common Application essay or supplemental pieces that a college asks for, are one of the few places that we get real voice from students. And so it's really important to think about the ways in which you're presenting yourself, and the supplemental essay can be an opportunity. Middlebury doesn't ask for a supplemental essay, but many institutions do. And so as you're planning and preparing to submit your application materials, make sure that you're seeing the supplemental essay as another opportunity to share an aspect of how you think and who you are and where you're coming from and how you approach the world. Supplemental essays can be fun. There are lots of really fun topics that schools ask about. There's also quirky questions that maybe you'll take you a little bit more time to think about. They're not as straightforward. But I would say take advantage of those chances and opportunities to put yourself forward and to pick the supplemental question that you feel is a good fit for you. So use the time, have someone else take a quick look at what you're doing, and keep in mind the institution that you're looking for. Back to you, Moses.
That's great, Nicole. Thank you. Chris, we have a UVM specific question, though I imagine your response would be applicable should a student apply to many schools. And that is, what is it that we at UVM, and again, other schools, I'm sure, what are we looking for? What makes a good candidate for admission?
Definitely. Thank you, Moses. And for me, especially, you're absolutely right. And having been in a variety of institutions, a variety of selectivity, location, size, the answer is going to be the same. There is no atypical student at that institution. That's what makes my job great. The fact we're able to look in applications, and we're fortunate enough to get applicants from around the world who apply to UVM, we're able to kind of hear and what Nicole just mentioned about telling their stories. That's what we want to hear. That's what makes a great candidate. There's no doubt, whether it comes via the essay, the application, and the supplemental essay if available. So for us, some of the foundational factors that'll make a great candidate for any institution are going to be the academics, of course. And I should step back and say, I mentioned the holistic review before. And most institutions, if not all, will consider this holistic, all-encompassing, every part of the application as part of that admissions review. But it's also fair to say that the academics are the driver. And when I say academics, that transcript, the work you've done in high school so far, everything from 9th grade on up and all the way through senior year. It's important to keep an eye on the rest of senior year as well. That'll usually be the foundational piece. but it's more than just numbers, right? And especially with testing, many schools are test optional now, some are test flexible. So you'll have an ability to speak beyond those number qualities. What are you doing extracurricular? Is it athletics, the arts, community service? All these, do you take care of family members? Do you work outside of school? All these pieces come into our overall comprehensive review towards looking at well-rounded students who are going to contribute to our community in a variety of ways. So there's not one necessarily formula that gets you in or out of any institution I've been associated with, or for most of us out there. But we think overall the academic piece will be important, but also making sure you're doing things outside of the classroom, engaging with family, engaging with the community, and of course with those essays too, yes, hearing your voice and hearing who you are, however you express yourself and identify. Moses, back to you.
Thanks so much, Chris. So Duffy, if you wouldn't mind, a question about sort of pulling back the curtain, if you will. One of the members of the audience would just like to know, what's the review process like from the standpoint of an admissions officer? What stands out? What does it look like when you sit down to review an application on that side of the process?
Thanks, Moses. Yeah, that's a great question. So to give some context to start, last year we had just over 75,000 applications. They're being read by a staff of about 35 to 40 people who are reading in some way, shape, or form. So for starters, the application process is lengthy. Our review process is considerable. It's long. We spend a lot of time and energy on the application review. It is a holistic process. There is a person reviewing each and every one of those applications as they go through the process, and more often than not, a couple people looking at those applications. When we receive an application, our staff reads regionally. So usually we read schools in a given geographic region. We'll try to really focus on understanding the schools in our area. We do that so we can know the different high schools that send us applications, know the curriculum available at those schools. It's never done in a way that's pitting students against each other. We're only going to take X number of students from one school or another. It's more so that we have that context.
I'm sorry, we've just lost your audio. You're back.
Sorry about that. Okay. So we are trying to really understand students within the context of their school. And so the first person reading their applications is usually someone who does have that understanding and primarily reads in that region. And then from there, we spend a lot of time in the committee process where we'll take that application, and a few other folks from our staff will then sit down and continue reviewing those applications as we make decisions. We start off really with more of an academic review, looking at the academic work using the high school transcript, and then diving into all those pieces that Chris just outlined from the last question around what stands out in the review process. So for us, we really do look at the academic piece first and foremost, and we want our staff to be looking at that first and foremost. And then from there, likely half the students who are applying to BU are strong enough to be admitted to BU academically. So then it's really diving into, okay, what makes a student unique? And that's where the first reader can advocate for that student, as well as the folks in the committee process. So it is very much a human review. It's a lengthy review process. It's a lot of long days and nights for our staff, usually reading at home. They're reviewing them, but it is very much a holistic human review process, even at a big place like BU. Moses, I can turn it back to you from there.
Duffy, thank you so much. So Sarah, there's a question I think would be good for you to answer, given your work consulting, and that is just how do you recommend that a student sort of, properly or adequately research a school? What approach should they take?
Sure. In addition to really peeling back the layers, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think I could maybe explain that more, especially as it comes to academic departments. That's important. Think about the types of classes that you'll want to take on a college campus, and not just for your major, for an elective too. So for example, you might be a student who, plans to major in biology, but you also have a strong interest in languages. So be sure that you check out, the French department and the Spanish department and the types of sequence of courses that they offer, the number of courses that they offer, and also any supporting programs. Is there a museum on campus? If you're a history major, you should visit the museum if you're going to make the visit to the college campus. So doing that additional research and sort of reviewing this, supporting departments and sort of the museums and the other things that go along with the specific institution, that will not only make you a much more informed consumer of the college process, but when you write your supplemental essays, you'll be able to reference specific things, which will ultimately make your essays stronger. So I definitely recommend to do that. Moses, back to you.
Thank you so much. So I believe we have time for one more question, Nicole, that I think I would direct to you. And it's a question about interviewing and whether or not you sort of would recommend that a student interview. Is it required? Do you do it virtually, in person, with alumni? What can you tell us about the interview process?
Yeah, I think interviews are an excellent example of how different institutions can be. And so there's a variety of ways in which you may be asked to connect with an institution. Some schools require interviews and others are more optional. Some have admissions counselors doing the interview or senior students at the college. In the case of Middlebury, we have alumni interviewers who are connecting with prospective applicants. And so you won't meet with an admissions counselor. I think it's important to really understand the institutions you're applying to, and as you're building a list, have those checklist items of whether or not an interview is required. I think that even the schools where it's optional, there's value in connecting with an institution beyond the admissions office. It's really important for you to connect with as many people at the institution as possible and to step aside from the admissions officer and connect with alumni, connect with undergraduate students at the college currently. So it's one of those pieces of research that you need to do to determine whether it's required or not required. I see great benefit in having that conversation and getting the experience of doing an interview. If you've had limited experience doing interviews in your life, there's value in going through that process as well. So do your homework a bit and ask the institution whether or not it's something that they require in their process. Back to you, Moses.
Well, I think we're about out of time here for our panel, and I do just want to thank all of you for your time and expertise. We're certainly grateful that you could join us today. Certainly a wealth of information, and nice to get it from so many different perspectives. So thank you. And now it's time for one last bit of advice as you sort of embark upon this process. I'd like to welcome Dr. Andy Rosenfeld. Dr. Andy Rosenfeld practices family psychiatry at the Vermont Center for Children, Youth, and Families. He loves to play with his kids. He loves being outdoors. He chairs quality improvement for the psychiatry department at UVM, and he is privileged to teach positive psychiatry and other topics to undergraduates through faculty here at the University of Vermont. So, Dr. Rosenfeld, with that, please take it away.
Thank you. Am I coming through? All right, it's such a pleasure to be here. This is going to be something sort of completely different, so welcome again to everybody. Thanks for those in attendance and the awesome panel. So as was mentioned, I have the great privilege of teaching as well as my clinical work as a child and family psychiatrist. I'm here in my office where I get to play with kids and try and help families with supporting whatever they're up against, and also get to share what I learn in that process with college students in our universal quest for happiness or something like it. So I'm just going to dip into that. I have a semester course on this that even feels like skimming the surface. So this 10 or 12 minutes will feel like really skimming the surface, but it's also cool and there's lots of depth everywhere. I like to start just by thinking about like, what is the whole pie of happiness and what do we know about that? So this research has really evolved over the last 20 years. It's a pretty new branch of psychology and psychiatry, positive psychology or psychiatry. And it boils down to approximately 50% of it, like many other psychological traits, seems to be genetic, how happy we are, how much well-being we have. So thanks to your parents for that contribution. And it gives you a little bit of a set point that we'll talk about, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. And a lot of people say, oh, well, the rest must be how much money I make, what job I have, am I married, what gender am I, where do I live, those sorts of things. That's the smallest sliver. That's the 10% here about our circumstances. So not that those things don't matter, but it leaves this big gap of 40% that's got the brain by it, because we can use our brains and our bodies collectively to have a good deal of say in how happy we are and where our well-being sits. Next slide, please. So this idea of the hedonic treadmill is sort of core toward the science of happiness because it gets at the limits of happiness. This is not, even though the research may be 20 years old, this is thousands of years old, humans trying to figure out what can make us happier, more balanced, better relationships, etc. And one way of framing what we run up against in the limits of happiness is the hedonic treadmill, that 50% of genetics seems to contribute to something like a happiness set point that we come back to in this treadmill, like a mouse running on a treadmill. And the good news is something terrible happens. They've done studies of people who've lost the use of their limbs. Tragic things can happen. Most of the time, a handful of months later, people kind of hover back toward that set point. Some of us might be experiencing that with the pandemic. There have been terrible losses, fears, changes, and you might have noticed that sometimes you come back. It feels like it's never going to recover, and maybe you have. Maybe you're still in that process. The sad part is when something really good happens, like they studied lottery winners as one example, you get this boon, and a few months later, you might be happier at first. We tend to come back to this set point. So sort of the holy grail of the science of happiness is what could boost our happiness and keep it there, kind of get us off of this hedonic treadmill. Next slide. So if we're going to look at that, if we want to see, does our happiness change and does it stay there, we have to be able to measure it. So this is part of the science piece. If you think about when you thought about the scientific method, you've got to be able to measure things for your results. So I'll read through this a little bit. You can think about 1 to 7, how much you personally agree with this, each statement, 1 being strongly disagree and 7 strongly agree. First is about leading a purposeful and meaningful life. Then we've got social relationships, are they supportive? Do you feel engaged in your daily activities? Do you contribute to the happiness of others? Do you feel competent and capable in activities that are important to you? Do I feel like a good person with a good life? Am I optimistic about the future? And do other people respect me? So you can add those up to get a score. This is called the flourishing scale. It's publicly available. And it gets at some of the key pieces of what the research says inflects our happiness, how our well-being is, hinges on some of these items here. So you've got that measurement. You can think about your number if you add them up. And there's no set point for like, you hit a 36, you're happy, or you're at a 10, you're unhappy. It's more about moving yourself along. And that's what the research is geared at. What are the things that move us in the direction of happiness? As a psychiatrist, I also spend a lot of my time thinking about unhappiness. People are struggling, anxiety, trauma, depression, attention problems, etc. How to have less of those, but this is the important other part of the equation, which is how to have more of the good stuff. We don't want to just not be depressed, not be anxious. We want to actually be flourishing, as the scale is named. Next slide, please. So part of what underlies our unhappiness is mind wandering. This is a really neat study from 2012, I believe. Killington and Gilbert out of Harvard buzzed people in their smartphones periodically throughout the day, and they asked them, how are you feeling? What are you doing? And where is your mind? And putting together those 3 aspects, they found some interesting things, part of which was that about 50% of the time, this is across thousands of adult humans, our minds are wandering. Whatever we're doing, that's not where our mind is. I might be talking to you, but I'm thinking about what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Or what's my next meeting? Or why did I say that thing to my mom this morning? She's going to be angry. And so that mind wandering loses out to the time that we're present in terms of well-being and happiness. So when you ask how people are feeling, the people whose minds are focused are generally rating themselves as happier, than anybody who's mind wandering. Even if I'm mind wandering to the vacation I'm going to take next week and sitting on a beach and feeling happy or whatever I'm going to be doing. So I sort of put this conclusion, it's about being present, not pleasant. There's something about our minds that wants to wander, and it tends to make us less happy. And on the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about what that something is. So a wordy slide with some neuroimaging, but you've got pictures of brains on the side showing this piece of the brain's network called the default mode network. Default meaning this is when people are getting their brain scanned and they're looking at the activity, and where they say, just hang on, we're doing this other task, you can rest. This is what the brain looks like. It doesn't rest. Our brains are never like shut down. These glowing areas are the areas of brain activity that show up at rest. In our default mode, when we're not doing anything, we are doing things. Our minds are wandering, and they tend to be several functions. One is autobiographical memory, thinking about myself. Two is thinking about the future. And the third one, theory of mind, is thinking about what other people are thinking. Are these students, parents, families that are listening to me thinking, he doesn't know what he's talking about, that blue sweater is really ugly, whatever. That's theory of mind and thinking about that. And you can see like those are healthy tasks, thinking about myself, the future, what other people are thinking. But as I put on the slide, when that falls into the hands of evil, it causes some of the problems that you might come to a psychiatrist for, like rumination, getting stuck on negative thoughts about the past, worries, kind of the what ifs. What if things don't go well tomorrow? What if I forget what I'm going to say on the next slide? And self-consciousness, thinking about, are other people looking at me and judging me negatively? And here are those areas and showing the correlation. So it's these same areas of the brain. They're abbreviated: the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the inferior parietal lobule, that make up this default mode network where our minds are at rest. They correlate with rumination, negative thinking about the past, and they anti-correlate with happiness. So the happier you are, the quieter they are, and the more you're ruminating, the more active they are. So they're going in that direction. So there's something here that needs to be addressed to balance our well-being. Next slide, please. What can we do? How do we get off this hedonic treadmill? I like this quote from the web. I didn't write it. The secret to having it all is knowing you already do. So everything we need is within us. Doesn't make it easy. Next slide. So the last few minutes, I will share with you the broad formula for the secret to happiness, and then we'll narrow in on one kind of example of a trait that may build happiness. So next slide, the formula for sustainable happiness is PERMA, really sexy, an acronym that stands for what's listed here: positive emotions. So doing the things that make us feel satisfied, joyful, happy, content, connected, all those kinds of things. That's a key. Engagement, doing the things where we feel harmonious, that we're really acting with all our talents and strengths engaged and involved. Some people refer to that as a sense of flow or state of flow, not really minding. Self-consciousness is very low. Time may fly by. Maybe it's sports or music or something where you've had that kind of flow experience. Positive relationships, the R in PERMA, that's sort of sine qua non. If you don't have positive relationships, it's really hard to be a thriving human being, and that correlates over time and over studies. It's one of the most highly correlated things with happiness, no matter how it's measured. Meaning, that's a little more elusive, but having some connection to a higher sense of purpose. It could be your family, your community, your work, your studies, something bigger than yourself. And accomplishment, things I feel like I can do well, that I have a sense of competence. So for the next slide, I'm going to narrow down on kindness as an example, as a piece of this whole picture and semester course, because kindness supports a lot of these. You can see how kindness would support relationships. If you're kind to people, they're going to be kind to you. We'll talk about that. It supports being engaged as a character strength. And if you're doing altruistic, community-oriented things, it supports positive emotions. We tend to feel better when we're kind. It can support a sense of meaning and accomplishment. So it brings them all together somewhat. These are some statistics about people who may be near to your age or the age you once were. Middle school students, high school students report more self-kindness, self-compassion. It lowers stress and negative emotions and raises their life satisfaction. Teens, in a different study, who had more self-compassion, also lower depression, anxiety, more social connectedness, that R for relationships. College students, being kind to themselves, also more happiness, more optimism, and other positive traits, lower anxiety and depression. And when they put a bunch of these studies together in what's called a meta-analysis and compare across the studies, it's a large effect size, meaning it's a powerful statistical effect that this is a big deal. Self-compassion reduces psychological distress, things like anxiety and depression in adolescence. So putting all that together, being kind to yourself and others helps you feel better and less feeling bad. Next slide. It's also good for your health. So here's several other studies. This was several hundred married women that they followed over a long course of time to see chicken or the egg, which is happening first. And people who were kind toward others, who volunteered, actually were less likely to develop a major illness. So there's some health and longevity effects that goes beyond our mental health. Now we're talking about our physical and whole health. Another study found a 44% reduction in early death among those who volunteered a lot. And students just watching a film of Mother Teresa's altruistic work had significant increases in their immune system strength to fight off infections. Next slide. Acts of kindness. So this is how you can operationalize it. What can I do? Doing kind things for other, a sticky note of gratitude, holding the door, buying somebody coffee, 5 acts per week had an increase in happiness. So talking about those holy grail of sustainably bumping up your happiness, getting us off the treadmill. Only 10 days, if 6 weeks from the first study is too much, 10 days, commit to that, acts of kindness, life satisfaction goes up significantly compared to a control condition. Next slide, please. What about in the brain? So some of those same areas you might recognize, the VMPFC, ventral medial prefrontal cortex. So here they put people in a brain scanner and let them play a game where you can either cooperate, everybody gets some money, or you can defect, you can cheat on the other person and try and get away with some money. But if you both cheat, then nobody gets any money. So it's a game of sort of weighing your risk. Is it better to cooperate and we all win some, or try and cheat and get away with a little more or nothing? And they show that when people cooperate, it activates the reward areas of the brain, and also this default mode network gets connected. So it's sort of shifting to the default mode network away from worries, rumination, self-consciousness toward cooperation and kindness in a positive way. Next slide. In this, you can see this nice separation. If you look at the bars going, they split from each other at what would be about 6 seconds. That's the same game when they reveal this other person either agreed with you and cooperated, and that's the bar that goes up in terms of the activity in these reward brain areas, or the dashed line on the bottom is they defected, they cheated on you, and the bar goes down, so less rewarding. And you can see there's another spike after 18 seconds. That's when you find out you're given the money. So just knowing that somebody cooperated with you has about the same brain juice as getting the money that you and that person earned by cooperating. So this is in our behavior, it's in our brains. How can you get it into your lives? Next slide, please. Thank you. A few ideas here. So random acts of kindness, just what it sounds like. Loving kindness meditation. You can find a bunch of these on the internet for free. It's also called metta, but this is about actually taking time to say, may I be happy, healthy, strong. May you be happy, healthy, strong. May everybody be happy, healthy, strong, even the people who are annoying or difficult. That practice has some really solid evidence that improves our own well-being and connection to others. Volunteering, that might be something you've been doing anyways through your high school, through the community, but also informal helping, which means you don't have to go to a soup kitchen and serve soup. Informal helping is helping the people you know, helping your friends move their stuff to college, or helping your parents make dinner, or so go do those things. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and thank you. I'll pause there.
Very good. Well, thank you, Dr. Rosenfeld. I hope you know how much we appreciate your insights and your time, and really all that you shared with us and the audience. I have to say personally, I find the sort of brain science of happiness and wellness fascinating. So I hope some of our students listening today find it equally rewarding, and perhaps, who knows, maybe some of them will sit in on one of your classes here at UVM. Well, folks, we're at the end of our time here. I hope that you found the program helpful. Regardless of where you may go on this admissions journey, know that there's a lot of help out there for you. We hope that you'll continue to revisit our websites and join in virtual and in-person programming at UVM and at any other school that you're interested in. But certainly we wish you well. We thank you for being here today. Reach out. We're here for help. Thanks a lot. Take care.